Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome to the day 2 of the SuperUnited Rapid and Blitz chess tournament in 2023. We're following now the game of the day. We're following now the spectacular derby between Alireza FIrouzja and Magnus Carlsen. And this is always a joy to watch because these two guys gave us many tactical games, many great endgame techniques, many theoretical novelties, many brutal tactical sequences. So it was always a pleasure to watch the game between Alireza and Magnus, and today also a great game has been played with cool endgame techniques, with immortal attacking ideas. So in my opinion, really the game of the day too, for sure. So let's see now what happened with the white pieces. Alireza FIrouzja opened with the move e4. Magnus Carlsen's response was e5, knight to f3, knight to c6. We have the Italian game and now the two knights defense. We have now the move d3, normal variations, and now if we move bishop to c5, we have now the gioco pianissimo, of course, the symmetrical variation, getting also the bishop into the game. So now c3, really the most often played line with the method to break and enter here in the center with the move d4. Now Magnus fixes the structure in the center with the move d6, and now Alireza plays bishop to g5. And this move, in my opinion, is a little bit more riskier than maybe to castle immediately or play h3, a prophylactic move bishop to g4. This move bishop to g5, if you play with the white pieces in the Italian game, you have to expect this line for sure. h6 is going to happen in 99% of your games if you play, of course, this line. And now you have to make a decision. Alireza goes, of course, with the bishop on an active square, stays and plays still this pin against the knight. But in the long run, I think we can expect Magnus Carlsen, of course, to push the pawn on g5 and then break and enter and push simply the position here on the king side. So Alireza got challenged in this way. a5. Good move also by Magnus, keeping the bishop on this diagonal, hitting, of course, also the pawn on f2. But if the bishop gets in danger, maybe with the d4 moves, then still you can keep your activity. So castling by Alireza, bishop to b6, king to h1, and now, as expected, the move g5. The bishop is now locked, and now Magnus Carlsen plays the move knight to h5. It seems many times in the beginning, if you're maybe playing with the white pieces this position, that black actually wants to get rid of the bishop here, but don't be sure about this. Black actually, I don't think that he wants to take out your bishop on g3. What the black is trying to do is to fix the structure here by playing the move knight to f4. After bishop to f4, g takes f4, the position could be open then on the g file, because when we evaluate now the pieces here on the board, the bishop on g3 is not a good piece. It's paralyzed by this pawn structure. On the other hand, the knight is much better. So I'm not sure if in any of these lines black would eventually trade off a good knight for your bad bishop, sort of. So that's why I think don't be so worried that your opponent is taking out the bishop on g3. Actually, his idea is here to move knight to f4. So knight from b to d2 played by Alireza, and now Magnus plays really not the best of moves here. Bishop to g4, it seems like a logical move. It's an attacking move. It's, of course, keeping the activity. You can get the bishop on the most active square, but when you play in an opening, you have to, of course, secure the king. The king's safety is the most important thing. And look at this. If you castle, for instance, if you play castling immediately, then d4 is, I think, here the idea of whites. The knight on h5 is a little bit loose. Of course, you see, if we maybe somehow take knight to d4, then the knight is hanging on h5. So this is now a tactic that bothers, of course, black in the continuation of the game. But black can keep the game simple. Can play queen to e7, has a good grip around the square. e5 will eventually play bishop to d7, rook to d8, rook to e8, maybe even f5 is an opportunity, but this is solid, I think, for sure. But Magnus played bishop to g4, and now Alireza asked him the question, where are you going to go with the bishop? If you play bishop to f3 here, if you take out the knight, then the queen is coming actively into the game. And the problem is now your whole concept with knight to f4, I think, is not working. Bishop to f4, g takes f4. We can play bishop to d5, maybe even d4 in some lines as an opportunity. Queen to e7, we hit. Then the knight comes on c4, good square for the knight. And look at the structure. This is weak. This is weak. All of this structural weaknesses. Isolated pawn on h6. I'm not saying this is completely winning, but I think the knight has a better life in these types of positions. So let's go back. After move h3, what you could do, of course, is to play knight to g3. Seems also quite tempting. I wanted to just prove this point here, that this move bishop to g4 is really a bad move, because after f takes g3, the bishop retreats. But look at this now. the whole attack is now open against the pawn on f7. Queen to b3, bishop to hit on f7 anyway. F file is open. Maybe the knight can be included. We can even play g4, lock the bishop really out. If we play g4, bishop to g6, the bishop will never be able to come into the game anymore. So really not the best of moves here by Magnus. After move h3, Magnus retreated, but still this bishop is not a good shape. And now Alireza should have simply used this moment and should have simply played the move d4. That's why this move bishop to g4 is not a good move. Look at this, d4 would be very devastating. E takes d4, c takes d4. You cannot take out this piece here because knight to d4. You can maybe try knight to g3 if you of course play bishop to d4, then the knight is hanging. But after knight to g3, f takes g3, you have this tactical issues always around the square f7. But Alireza played slightly more passive line, left simply the attack of the f7 pawn, which is in my opinion wasn't good choice also by Alireza. Now Magnus goes with this idea, as we said, knight to f4. He doesn't want to give up his powerful knight for such a bad bishop on g3, but now of course knight to c4. Alireza activates also the pieces, and in some lines he could occupy the weak f5 square, which of course Magnus Carlsen allowed because he pushed the pawn on g5. So we have now the move h5, knight takes b6. This was really an annoying bishop to handle. Good trades of pieces, I think, by Alireza. C takes b6, and now again with the same concept, rerouting the knight here on c4, where it could attack, of course, the b6, but also the d6 pawn. So here we have king to f8, and king to f8 is a preparation to maybe launch here in kingside flank attack with still sort of king in the center. The king is now more secured on f8. Tricky idea here, we have to say, by Magnus Carlsen. And now Alireza realized his chances with his breakthrough idea d4. He's saying your king is simply too long in the center of the board. Now I'm trying to open the center. And now Magnus, I think, makes his really first important mistake. The other mistakes were, I think, tiny little mistakes, which of course gave Alireza a better game. But this move I really didn't like. This move I really think that this is simply not good what Magnus did here. Knight to e7 forces basically a trade of bishops, but look at this, when the bishop was on d7, it was such a powerful piece on this diagonal. Look at this, it controlled simply the whole king side diagonal, and now there were some chances maybe to open the position with the move g4, h4. So with the rook on the h file and the king on h1, maybe there were some attacking chances for Magnus. Unfortunately for Magnus, he traded off now his powerful bishop, and now Alireza goes into a simplified line. D takes e5, pretty much everything is forced, and black is not having a good game because of the structural weaknesses. Look at this, b6 weak, the e5 weak, g5 weak. What should you do? Maybe the best of ways here is to simply trade off the queens and hope for the best going into an endgame, maybe hoping to get a draw. But after move f6, the problem is now again white has a much better activity. We simply push here, f takes g3, f takes g3, knight to h4, knight to f5 is sort of an idea to reroute the knight on a good square, and rook to d6 is going to happen for sure. Then of course attack the weak f6 pawn, but also the weak b6 pawn. You cannot even compete on the d file because you don't have the rook connection, so you never really castled in the game. So that's, I think, the issue here. So therefore knight to f3, Magnus tried somehow to complicate things by keeping the queens on the board, but Alireza accepts the challenge, says, okay, thank you, I have an extra pawn, I retreat with the queen, and now I simply compete on the d file because still you don't have a rook connection. We have a king to g7, Magnus finally secures the king, but now again with normal ideas, keeping the pressure against the simple weakness here on e5. So we have a knight to e6 by Alireza, we have here knight to h4, knight takes h4, bishop to h4. This becomes now a bishop versus knight middle game slash end game stage, in which I think white's light square bishop is perfectly fine. It's much better than the knight, because when we are searching positions for a knight, we want to fix the knight somewhere, especially on light squares where the knight couldn't be maybe attacked by the dark square bishop. And it's not seeing a good light square here for the knight. Even if you get it somehow here to b5, it can be always kicked away. Too many of the pawns of blacks are on dark squares, which are of course clear object for the bishop. So in my opinion, this should be, I think, in top grandmaster level, a completely winning game here for white. So f6, we have f3, b5, bishop to f2, queen to c4, b3, kicking away the queen after a couple of trades of rooks. Here Alireza again got challenged on the d file. He traded off very happily, I think. Here knight to d8, queen to d3, occupying the only open file. We see also in this positional problem, white is much faster. White get the d file, and even if this game reaches the fully endgame stage without maybe the queens on the board, still of course white is winning because of the extra pawn. We should not forget about this. So as I said, bad here position for Magnus Carlsen for sure. Knight to f7, Alireza pushes further, c5, kicking away the knight, not allowing good squares for the knight. As I said, black is searching for a good light square on the board. Now king to h2, a4, and now good move, I think, here by Alireza. Queen to d5, really good idea to trade off the queens, because if queen to d5 would have happened, then e takes d5 connects now two mobile pawns, which are restricting the knight's ability to play. And I think there is now this clear path for the king to g1, king to f1, e2, d3, c4, b5. The king will be activated and will attack the pawns on the queen side. So this would be completely winning for sure. So from queen to d5, Magnus Carlsen's queen got a little bit pushed away from the action. Bishop to f2, knight to h8, f4. Maybe there were some better lines, but this is perfectly fine. Every line, I think, now for white is pretty good. We have queen to b2, attacking now. Okay, this main weakness, and we'll talk about this weakness in the next couple moves more, because this will be now a huge problem for Alireza. But when we watch computer evaluations, the engine simply loves, of course, now white's position. White should be winning here, but this is fast time format game. This is rapid chess, and of course many mistakes can happen. So we have bishop to g3 here by Alireza, e takes f4, bishop to f4, knight to f7, bishop to e3, knight to e5, and now bishop to f4, again attacking the knight. We have now the move a3, bishop to e5, f takes e5, and now queen to e6 here by Alireza. This wasn't a good move because Alireza has the issue that he has to protect now his pawn on a2. And the only way to make some kind of a progress in this particular game is by realizing that you are in the fully endgame. And in the fully endgame stage, you have to play actively with your king. You don't treat your king anymore as something that you have to defend. And that's the simple rule. That's the most important rule, I think, even in chess endgames. Keep your king active. Your king is now a monster in endgames. Not something, as I said, that you have to defend. And Alireza makes now this mistake. Queen to e6 allows here Magnus Carlsen to lock the king out. Look at this, what could have happened if, for instance, Alireza would have played the move king to g3. This would be now the way to go. Now the king is dancing here all over the board. The king can be maybe get checked a couple of times, but never really checkmated, because black's king is also naked. Black has to also worry about his own king. So it's not so easy for Magnus just to rely his whole game around this pawn on a2. He has to also play a defensively good game. For instance, king to f8, we get this king closer. You can maybe even pick up now the pawn here, but maybe now we deliver a couple of checks, and now when this pawn is taken, finally we have a passer that could roll here. For instance, you try to retreat, we deliver a couple of checks. This is just one possible line that I'm showing you that could maybe win the game. You just hope for this kind of a position where you trade off the queens and then go into the fully end games. And now, of course, we pick up this pawn, and this is game over. So queen to e6 allowed here Magnus Carlsen to lock out Alireza's king out of game after queen to g4 that Alireza played. Now Magnus made a huge blunder. Magnus played now the move king to f7, and when you watch now this position in the first place, it seems so that nothing should be wrong with this move, but actually this move is a problem because the king is lined up on the same file where already this pawn is. So this is now on the same rank, pardon me, as the pawn is. So for instance, if Magnus would have played the move king to f8, he would not be lined up on this rank. Maybe you can pick up this pawn, but now black can also pick up this pawn. You can deliver a couple of checks, but now even if you try something like this, you have to always worry about this passer on the a file. But in this scenario that Magnus Carlsen played, we have queen to h4. We have now queen to a2 by Alireza, but now look at this. This comes with a check, and you lose now this pawn, and suddenly Alireza creates now a passer on the c file. So this move king to f8 would be even, I think, a draw for Magnus Carlsen, but unfortunately he made a mistake. Alireza grabbed the pawn, and from this point on it's a one-way ticket. Alireza delivered a couple of good checks, simply pushed the pawn further. Magnus took now the pawn on e4, but even if you play here a2, even if you start to push the pawn here, then after a couple more moves here we can maybe deliver a couple of checks. But now the most important thing is to get this pattern. We're pushing this pawn further. You have to finally accept now this idea, but now after queen to e6 a check, now we pick up this pawn, and this would be again a completely winning endgame here for white. So this was the winning idea. But here, as we said, after move queen to h7, let's go back. Alireza played simply queen to b6, and now simply pushed the pawn further. And as we said, Magnus Carlsen played queen to e4 instead of a2, but it's now completely winning because after a couple of checks here, queen to f8 was played, and now after king to g6, now finally c7, and in this position Magnus Carlsen resigned because no good checks are possible. The queens will be off the board, and then in the next move we can have a promotion. You cannot even get behind because the promotion is going to happen anyway, so it's a fair resign here by Magnus Carlsen. So great intense game by these two tacticians, these two great players. I really enjoyed this game because again this was a powerful game with cool ideas in the Italian game, with great strategies, with attacking chess with the black pieces here by Magnus Carlsen. Made of course a couple of inaccurate mistakes, which are of course a part of the game, but we have seen that everything can go wrong in just one simple move. You can slip the game, you can have, I think, even losing game turning around. So in my opinion, again, a beautiful chess game played by Alireza FIrouzja and Magnus Carlsen. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. Interesting ideas of the Gioco Pianissimo for sure. If you want to see more games from this chess event, check out our coverage so far. Here's the link of the game that we have analyzed before, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.